welcome back to my channel. For those of you who may be new here, hey, my name is Amy and I am a true crime YouTuber from Australia. If you like what you see today, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. It really does help me out a lot behind the scenes. I appreciate you all being here. Go and grab a coffee, a tea or snack, whatever tickles your fancy, and let's get into it. Today's case is about Joanna Dennehy, who became one of UK's most notorious serial killers. However, the case only gets weirder after the crimes were committed. Joanna is a real piece of work, and I'm going to spend some time actually providing you more context into who she is as a person. And I'm doing this in the hopes that it's able to paint a really good picture for you all, because she is a very complicated individual. Joanna was born on August 1982 in St Albans, Hertfordshire, and I hope I'm saying that right, but she grew up in nearby Harpenden. Her father Kevin worked as a security guard whilst her mother Kathleen was a shop manager. Joanna has a younger sister named Maria, who had a successful career in the army and went on to run her own IT company. Despite Joanna seeming to have a pretty normal upbringing, she has claimed that she was abused as a child, but there is no evidence of this, and her family and friends insist she was always treated well and brought up in a loving home. Growing up, Joanna played in the school hockey and netball teams and was overall a really bright and capable student. Her parents had hoped that she would go on to university and study to be a lawyer. They even paid extra towards her tuition to help her get to this goal. However, by the time Joanna was in her mid-teens, everything seemed to go downhill. She started associating herself with older boys and started skipping school quite regularly. And as you do when you're a young teenager, you find yourself a boy or a girl and you fall in love and they become the absolute world, like they are your world. And she just so happened to fall in love with a boy called John Trainer, who was actually 5 years her senior, making him 20 years old at the time, and she was 15. Her parents were not happy with this at all, and you can imagine why. Why is a 20-year-old man wanting to be with a 15-year-old girl? That is just so gross in my opinion. I can only imagine that once they realized that Joanna, their daughter, was going down the wrong path, they probably realized that their hopes of her becoming a lawyer were getting slimmer each day. Joanna and John eventually began living together, but they lived together in the roughs on the wasteland, which was still close to her family home, but she did actually eventually end up going back home. I'm assuming that her bumming around town in the wastelands got old and she just wanted to go back home where she had it pretty good. However, the reconciliation between her and her family did not go well and did not long last at all. When Joanna was living out of home with her boyfriend, she actually picked up a drug habit, and she'd been using drugs for quite some time by the time she had come back to live at home with her parents. She was so heavily into alcohol and drugs that pretty much any time she would show up to school, she was absolutely plastered. She ended up leaving home for good from the age of 16, and she would really only return if something benefited her or if she needed money to fix her drug and alcohol habit. Joanna and John went on to eventually fix up their own place. They found a nice home and it was located in Luton. And while she was still a teenager, they both ended up sharing 2 children together. At this stage in her life, there was no contact between Joanna and her family. And it was basically due to the fact that Joanna was like, unless you pay me to see your grandchildren, I'm not seeing you. I'm having nothing to do with you, and you are having nothing to do with your grandchildren. So due to this absolutely insane request, they pretty much permanently were estranged from each other, and up until the days that she committed these crimes, they literally had nothing to do with her. They were essentially just not her family anymore. She threw them to the trash. They weren't worth anything unless they paid her. As you can imagine, Joanna's relationship with John was not healthy. Joanna actually cheated on him with men and women, and she was reportedly a very terrible mother. And I don't say that lightly. I feel like when I say that, there's proof out there that you are a very horrible mother. It was mentioned that she frequently told her friends that she never wanted to become a mother, and it actually wasn't unusual for Joanna to leave the home for days, sometimes even weeks on end, and she would just leave the kids with John. She would have no explanation. She would just pick up and leave, and this became quite normal. Joanna and John had tried to mend their relationship quite a few times, and they were wanting a fresh start and to really give it a go for one last time. So they ended up moving to East Anglia. There she had a job as a labourer on farms and would sometimes be paid in alcohol rather than cash, but due to her drinking habits, things just got worse. She started to harm herself by cutting her arms, body and neck with razor blades, and even scratched herself under her eye to create a tattoo of a star. Joanna's behaviour just became worse over time, especially towards John. He would cop everything from her. But the last straw for John is when Joanna started to actually carry a dagger, which is a kind of knife. In 2009, he packed the kids' bags, took the kids, never returned, and he left Joanna. And it was probably the best thing he could have done. And the reason why it was the best thing he could have done, one, to protect himself and the children, it wasn't a great environment, but because Joanna had been bragging about how she wanted to kill someone, and she started keeping this dagger in her shoe, like in her boot leg, and he was just so scared that they would fall victim to her wanting to kill someone. Once John and the kids left, Joanna started drifting from address to address. She started stealing and even turned to prostitution to fund her drug and alcohol habits. She even served some time in prison during this time, and she did get some help for her mental health struggles while she was in prison. After her arrest, she was examined by a psychiatrist, Dr. Farnham. He said that she had paraphilia sadomasochism. I don't know if I said that correctly, I probably butchered it. People with this condition experience sexual excitement from acts involving the infliction of pain, humiliation, and or bondage. Joanna wasn't shy and openly admitted to love receiving pain and inflicting it. After leaving the hospital, Joanna turned up at a Quicklet, a small letting agency in Peterborough, where she came across a bedsit to move into. Quicklet co-owner Kevin Lee soon gave her work doing odd jobs and helping to evict tenants, which gave her access to a number of local houses. A man was walking his dog. It was a route that this man and his dog had walked regularly every single day. However, on this particular day, he noticed his dog was sniffing more than usual, like really trying to follow some sort of scent. He didn't really think much of it. Maybe he was just sniffing other dogs that had been there. You know what dogs are like. But then his dog eventually wanted to circle back around. Like, he was really keen to follow this scent. So the owner thought, why not? Let's go on an adventure. We have some time. Let's just go for a little bit more of a walk. This is when the man and his dog came across a body lying face down in a ditch. The body was a male, but it appeared that he was wearing female clothing. Specifically a black sequin dress, but only on the top half of his body. He was naked from the waist down. It was evident that he had suffered multiple stab wounds all over his body and was dumped and left in a ditch. Now, Kevin was actually a missing person, and his family and the police had been looking for him. He was reported missing on the 29th, the day before he was found. Kevin lived in Peterborough, not far from where his body was found. And actually the day prior to him being found dead in this ditch, his car was found burnt. Like, someone had literally vandalized and arsoned his car. It was literally just a metal frame. Now, police had their suspicions and an inkling that someone must have known Kevin. Like, the way that they had murdered him, dressed him up, popped him in a ditch, but then also damaged his car the day prior. Like, surely they were linked. Someone must have had a vendetta against Kevin. It had to be someone that he knew. Police did have an inkling that whoever did this knew Kevin. It seemed personal. They destroyed his car and then killed him, dumped his body, but also dressed him in women's clothing, like in some way they wanted to embarrass Kevin and his family. Now, a little bit about Kevin, because he does deserve to be spoken about. He was married and a father of 2 children. He was said to be a kind and patient man, and he was also a landlord in his own city of Peterborough. Now, did something go wrong with a tenant? Did he potentially raise the rent, or did he kick somebody out? Well, after some investigation from the police, there was one name that really sparked interest: Joanna Dennehy. On Kevin's phone records, Joanna's name and number came up very frequently, and she also was one of Kevin's tenants. Joanna was known for also being romantically linked with a criminal the police knew all too well, Gary Stretch. He was 7'3" and honestly not an attractive looking bugger. He looks intimidating, and I can imagine that his height alone would be absolutely terrifying. He himself had been in and out of prison, with his latest stint in prison being for theft and burglary. When the police were trying to trace down Joanna, it was discovered via her mobile data that she was actually close to the location where Kevin's car was torched. And also Gary Stretch was very close to the same location as well. So I'm thinking in my head at this stage of the case, did she use Gary to scare Kevin off? Did Gary engulf his car to send some sort of message to Kevin? Did Joanna potentially have Kevin killed, or did she kill him herself? Police still haven't located the pair, but have labelled them wanted and very dangerous people. And it was obvious that they were both on the run. But this is where things got pretty bad. Joanna and Gary had left Peterborough and were located in Hertford, which was 3 hours away. They ended up at a friend's house and they were reported to be in such a good mood. So much so that they had a little photo session and they did some photography at the front of the friend's unit. And they must have decided to do this to mark this wonderful achievement in murdering someone. Joanna felt in control, and to be honest, she was. She was the boss and driver of this life. And Gary was just a little pet to her. And he followed and he did whatever she wanted him to do. A great example of this is when they both arrived in Hertford and finished their photo session at their friend's house. Joanna had a contact that was going to link her up with some other contacts to help Joanna out. One of the contacts didn't seem very willing to be around Joanna, but he did actually go to a convenience store where they went to buy some cigarettes. And as you can see in the footage, Joanna and her friend were cuddling, but she actually had a knife to his chest, and then she proceeded to tell the shop worker that he had a lovely bottom and made him do a twirl. Shortly after this bizarre interaction, a local police officer had contacted the police in Peterborough due to getting a report that Joanna was entering a local petrol station and filled a basket with whatever they wanted and then proceeded to leave the store without paying and drove off. They legged it, but the staff recognized Joanna from the television and then reported it to the local police. The local police reported it to the detectives who were looking for the pair, and they were pretty much on their way. They were making the 3-hour drive. And then minutes later, all three of them were driving along, and Joanna went on to say, "Hey Gary, you need to find me one." And what she meant by this was, "Hey Gary, find me some poor sucker and I'm gonna kill them. Just anyone, just pick anyone out that you see on the street right now and I'm gonna go and kill them." So Gary started searching, as he does. He was driving along and then he spotted a man walking his dog. Gary slowed down the car that they were all in and he eventually stopped behind the man and the dog. Joanna wasted absolutely no time in jumping out of the car and making her way towards the man. She basically jumped him. She went on to stab him 20 times, and it was because she just wanted to. Then she got up, acted like nothing had happened, and she got back into the car. Moments later, Gary chose another bystander. It was another innocent man just walking his dog. She got out of the car, jumped another man, but she stabbed him, but then she stole his dog. Moments later, Joanna was arrested and she had this dog on her lap. Like, that poor dog, he must have known in some way that like this was happening. Like his owner was hurt and then he was taken away. That poor dog. Gary ran away. He escaped the police for a short while. He actually went to go and buy a bottle of water, but then he was soon found and also arrested. And so was Leslie Layton, their third wheeler in the car. When Joanna was arrested, she actually showed more concern about the dog's welfare. She was really worried about where the dog was going to end up, but she never showed the same concern for the people that she had just, for all she knew, just murdered on the street. At the police station, Joanna was reportedly very flirtatious. She was complimenting the police officers. Any opportunity she had to compliment them, she would.
Afternoon. And you are?
Joanna Dennehy.
So you've been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and murder. Okay.
Would you be true if you got for attempted murder and murder?
I wouldn't, but...
No, but I'm just smiling.
I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
I was just out enjoying the sunshine.
You're reading about Nicholas shortly.
Say again.
You're reading about Nicholas shortly.
I look forward to it.
You're a decent cover. I'm a fat girl.
Yes, I'm going to be caught, so.
Yes, please.
Alright, go on then,
Do you want
Joe.
some food first?
We'll get you some
I'll take your order when you get in the cell.
Come on, then.
What do you want to drink?
Now it's the next day. Joanna has been arrested, but you think the killing spree would be over, right? You would assume that she has been held accountable for the 3 murders that we already know about. However, the lead detectives got a call. The call was asking him if he knew about the other bodies. Near where Kevin's body was found, there was another male body located, and that body belonged to John Chapman, a Navy veteran. John had been sharing the house with Joanna that they both lived in, the one that Kevin managed. John and Joanna did not get along at all. It was actually reported that John was terrified of Joanna. He made it obvious by telling neighbours that he knew that Joanna was going to kill him one day. Investigators found a blood-stained mattress in their share home whilst investigating John's murder, which pointed to the fact that she most likely stabbed and killed him on the bed. But hang on, there's another victim of Joanna's. Now, I'm not 100% Polish efficient, so I'm not sure if I'm absolutely butchering this name, but the victim's name was Lucas Slabozowski, a Polish man. He was last seen on 19th of March 2013 using an ATM, where he would then head off to meet Joanna. Both Lucas and John were stabbed to death. Lucas was murdered first, and Joanna said she killed him because she just felt like killing him. He essentially was the cherry that popped for Joanna and started the craving of her wanting to kill more. Now, Lucas and Joanna were apparently sleeping with each other. I couldn't find too much information, but it was very short-lived. Joanna was very popular with the men. She was able to lure them in. I am not sure how. She must have had an amazing personality, but unfortunately, anyone that really liked Joanna and wanted to try and help Joanna essentially just ended up being killed. Evidently, this murder didn't bother Joanna at all. As I said, it's now given her a craving to want to kill more. She actually showed Lucas's corpse to a 14-year-old girl who lived in the neighborhood, along with some of her friends. Here guys, look what I did. Isn't it amazing? Look at the bin. The bin is great. I chose this bin. This is the product in the bin. I did this. This is amazing. She was showing off. She was so proud. And that is like the sickest thing, is that she has now traumatized her friends and some 14-year-old. Like, vile. Now, I'd imagine that her friends were too scared to say anything because obviously she had just murdered someone. There was clearly something wrong with her. So I'd imagine that her friends were absolutely just like pooping their pants and not wanting to say anything because that could be them next. They could be in that bin. Now, there is some good news that comes out of this case, and it's the fact that the 2 men that she randomly jumped and stabbed, they both survived. They just survived. They were very, very wounded as they were both stabbed at least 20 times, but they survived. Joanna was now considered a serial killer. Despite her efforts on trying to add 2 more innocent victims to her kill list, she still took 3 men's lives that she knew in person. She knew them. She had some sort of relationship with them. Joanna was clearly a sociopath. She had no remorse for what she had done. She got like sexually aroused from what she had done, and she would do it again. If she wasn't caught, I am certain that she would have just killed and killed and killed and killed. Funnily enough, when she was questioned, she didn't have a lot to say. All she would say was, no comment, no comment, no comment. When Joanna was awaiting trial in prison, she had a diary that she kept, and this diary was actually found by prison guards. She was planning to kill a female guard, then steal her keys and one of her fingers to bypass the security software that you need to have your own fingerprint to open the doors. These threats were considered highly credible when the investigations were happening, which is so scary as a guard. One day you could just not go home from being on shift. And I know that's the reality of a lot of these types of jobs, but that would have just shaken me to my core. That poor guard. Like if that diary wasn't found, she may not be with us today and she would be another victim of Joanna's. Joanna wasn't happy about her diary being found. She actually kicked up a stink and said it was a violation of her human rights and that her diary is private. In February of 2014, Stretch was found guilty of aiding Dennehy on the 2 attempted murders, while Leslie Layton was found guilty of perverting the course of justice. Now, there was a gentleman named Mark who was let off as he didn't really do much and probably didn't want to be around Joanna, but was too scared to actually go away. Dennehy herself was given a whole life sentence for the triple murder and 2 attempted murders. When her sentence was read out, she laughed. She had no ounce of emotion other than to laugh in front of the bereaved families of the victims. Joanna didn't say much at all, if anything. She did say towards the end though, that she felt sorry for the 2 victims that she had jumped, but she did not feel sorry for the 3 other murders. The judge told Dennehy that she had a sadistic lust for blood. Now, if the murders weren't enough proof of this, what Dennehy told a prison psychiatrist definitely was. I killed to see how I would feel, to see if I was as cold as I thought I was. Then it got moreish. She is one of the only 3 living women in the UK who would die in prison. The others are Moira Henley and Rose Marie West, who apparently is petrified of Joanna. Now, if Rose being scared of Joanna doesn't paint a better picture for you all, believe me, Rose is not a good person, and to be afraid of Joanna speaks volumes. What's Joanna up to now, do you ask? Well, in 2018, she launched a legal bid to marry her partner, her lesbian lover, her girlfriend Hayley, who was a thief in her spare time. So perfect match, really. Now, it's still in bid as far as I can see to this day. So, I mean, I guess apart from that being a little bit of an obstacle, I'm sure she is living her best life. She's in prison, she's surrounded by people that are like-minded, that have done similar horrific things. She's probably loving it. That is all from me today. I hope you enjoyed listening about this case and learnt something new. I will see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye.